Hello friends, welcome back to yet another session on the Meritshine channel. And again, I would want to start off with an interesting quote that I came across in an interesting video from the co-founder of Zerodha. So what is it all about? It basically says that 5 years later, 5 saal baad, the things that you are worrying about today won't matter anymore, right? So why not do what you have to do today and have that stupid faith that everything will work out somehow. So what it says is that 5 saal baad kya hona hai, what's going to happen after 5 years, no one really knows, right? So and point is, after 5 years, the things that you're worrying about today won't even matter, won't even exist probably at that point in time. So why not just do what you're supposed to do today and have that faith? And he adds that word stupid in front of it, saying that puri duniya bhale hi soche ki we are stupid. Let them think whatever they have to think, right? But have that stupid faith that whatever you're doing today, it will add value and it will bring in the best results for you somehow in the future, right? A very interesting saying which kind of emphasizes again on the present rather than worrying about what happened, rather than worrying about what is going to happen, right? And that's something which is quite important for all of us to have in our lives so that we can just concentrate on the one thing that really matters, which is today. So on that note, let's kickstart the session today. And what I have in store for you today is another very interesting session. So it's a continuation of the session that we had yesterday. And a lot of you had reached out to us again asking as to what exactly would be covered by Meritshine through the program. So I thought it better to address it here itself. As a response to all the queries that you guys posted on various forums asking about what exactly is the RBI Grade B program of Meritshine going to be all about. So I'm going to address that particular question from a finance perspective today. So what's in it for you as far as the RBI Grade B Finance section is concerned, right? So without further ado, let's jump right in. So one of the most basic things that is required to be done when you're looking at a syllabus that is so vast is to basically split that syllabus into multiple segments and try and attack each of those segments individually, right? So in our case, when you're talking about segments, we are basically going to call them as the modules, and what exactly we'll be doing in them, that's what we're going to be talking about. Now, the first thing required is to have a very strong base and very strong fundamentals, right? And that's what we're going to be concentrating on vis-a-vis the individual modules that are there. So when you look at the overall syllabus, you obviously saw that the first section or the first segment was relating to financial systems. And within financial systems, obviously we're looking at covering the regulators of banks and financial institutions, which essentially means that we'll be looking at covering the majority of regulators from this space. So obviously we'll talk about RBI, we'll talk about SEBI, we'll talk about AMFI, we'll talk about PFRDA and some of the other agencies which are acting as regulators in this space. So we'll talk about those agencies and institutions. And obviously, we'll also look at essentially the banking system in India overall, right? So we'll obviously look at the structure and the concerns associated with the banking system in India. We talk about the different types of banks that are there, right? So what is a scheduled bank? What is a non-scheduled bank? Then you look at basically talking about things like what is a payments bank? What is a small finance bank? What is a foreign bank? How is it different from a private bank? Then what is a public sector bank? Then what is the difference between, let's say, a public sector bank and a nationalized bank, if at all? So all of those things will technically get covered in this segment. And then we're looking at other financial institutions which are also important. We're talking about SIDBI, Exim, NABARD, NHB, and the likes will also be covered in this particular segment, right? And we'll also look at specifically some of the other types of banks wherein we talk about your regional rural banks and your urban cooperative banks as well. So covering the holistic banking system in India. Next thing that we'll be looking at addressing is, of course, the changing landscape of the banking sector in the country. So obviously, once you talk about the banking system in India in terms of the static knowledge, you also need to understand what are the changes and guidelines that have come from a banking landscape perspective, how it has evolved, how it has changed over the years. And that is something that will be covered in this particular chapter. Then next, we'll be basically looking at the impact of the global financial crisis of 2007 and 2008, what exactly happened, and what was India's response to the global financial crisis, not just in the immediate aftermath. So we'll not only just talk about 2009, 2010, but also in the subsequent decade in terms of how has India responded to the global financial crisis and what are some of the benefits and let's say the disadvantages or something like that, right? So we'll cover all of those aspects over here. Then the next thing that we're looking at is basically moving to module 2, which basically talks about your financial markets. So when I talk about financial markets, you'll again look at your primary and your secondary markets, again in the context of forex, in the context of money markets, in the context of, let's say, securities markets or debt markets or bond markets as they're called, and also the equity markets overall. Now this is obviously a very interesting aspect because it will cover a lot of dynamic topics and what are the day-to-day developments as far as this particular space is concerned, and quite an interesting topic overall because it also helps hone your overall understanding of finance as well. So we'll cover a lot of these elements here. Obviously we'll be talking about the various functions that are there of these markets, what kind of instruments are traded in these markets, and what are some of the recent developments as well. So that is something which will be covered from a financial markets perspective. Now obviously when I talk about instruments, we'll also look at another aspect of financial markets, which is the basics of derivatives, and we'll basically look at covering your futures. Then we'll talk about your forwards, we'll also talk about your swaps, and of course we'll also look at options as well. So we'll cover the basics of derivatives in a holistic manner, and that is going to give you again good insights in terms of some of these latest instruments that are there. And of course when you talk about the global financial crisis as well, it was obviously because of some complex instruments that were created, which were nothing but derivatives only, right? So basically a good understanding of derivatives will also basically help you get good information from the perspective of global financial crisis as well. So that is something which will help you overall. So from that perspective, again, this topic becomes quite important, right? And predominantly when you talk about this segment, this is where the possibility of a lot of numericals is definitely there, right? So obviously, if at all the RBI rethinks their strategy in terms of, let's say, giving numericals, then this will be the space where the highest probability of numericals can actually happen. So we'll cover a whole gamut of numericals and conceptual questions from this perspective as well, right? Another important aspect that gets added to your primary markets is also looking at the global financial markets. What exactly is happening globally? What is it happening from an international banking perspective? What are the broad trends? What are some of the latest developments that are happening from this angle? So all of these things is something that will be covered from a global financial markets perspective. So while this has been given as part of the general topics, it's important to reclassify this in this segment because this module covers financial markets. So automatically all the products that are there from a global perspective and all the trends that are there from an international banking standpoint also need to be covered in this particular module itself, and that's what we will be doing. Now moving further, we look at the third module, which essentially is your general topics. Again, quite an important segment because it obviously has quite a huge weightage as far as the exam is concerned. So here again, we'll basically be talking about starting with risk management because this is a very important aspect of the banking sector in itself. How exactly has risk evolved over the years and what are the different types of risks? What are the banks trying to do at this point in time to ensure that any kind of stress that is there in the system can be addressed holistically and, let's say, avert any kind of financial crisis that is possible, right? So what exactly are the risk management measures that have been adopted, right? So we'll also be covering things like your RBIA, which is basically your risk-based internal audit, and a lot of similar things that have been happening from a risk standpoint in the banking space. Next thing that we'll look at doing is obviously looking at your financial inclusion itself. Again, a very, very important topic in the context of what the RBI is looking at from the perspective of ensuring that even the lowest strata of the society is included in this financial revolution. So from that perspective, this is definitely a topic which is of high importance, and this is something again that we'll be covering quite holistically, addressing financial inclusion. What are the changes that are happening in financial inclusion? How technology is having an impact in financial inclusion? All these things will definitely be covered. Moving further, we're obviously looking at your alternate sources of finance. Obviously, not only will we be looking at the traditional sources that have been there. So when I talk about the traditional methods, what do I mean? So I'm basically talking about things like your factoring, forfeiting, leasing, franchising. So all of these are, let's say, things that have been there in the past. And then you also talk about the latest trends that are there in this space. You talk about venture capital, you talk about your angel investors, you talk about your revenue-based financing, and let's say even crowdfunding. So all these are some of the latest additions, right? So we'll also look at things like your alternate investment funds. So all of those will be discussed in this particular segment. Another very interesting topic overall. Then we'll basically be looking at another aspect, which is your private and social cost benefit. So let's say, for example, you talk about things like setting up a factory, right? And let's say if you created that factory, while the factory in its sense can obviously create a lot of jobs, but at the same time, let's say if it is leading to some kind of a pollution, then obviously it is having a positive as well as a negative impact. So you talk about things like jobs and pollution as possible externalities to your private investment. So when I talk about, again, externalities, is it a positive externality? Is it something which is leading to benefits, or is it something which is a cost? So all of those things will be considered as far as your private and social cost benefits is concerned. Next thing, another important topic for this year especially was your public-private partnership. Again, a very, very important aspect in the sense, especially from an infrastructure sector perspective, wherein a lot of, let's say, your projects happen in the combined way of looking at both public as well as private partnership, right? So what are the different methodologies? What are the different models that are available in this? All of these things will be discussed in this particular segment. Then next, we're talking about a very, very important aspect, which is your corporate governance in the banking sector. So we'll first of all look at what is corporate governance overall, what are the basic principles around it, what are the benefits, right? What are the pitfalls as far as corporate governance is concerned? What was the need for corporate governance to basically be brought in, especially from a global context as well as from an India context? And then we'll also look at corporate governance overall and specifically from a banking sector standpoint as well. So we'll also be covering the latest guidelines that have been provided by the SEBI, by RBI. So we'll look at covering things like your LODR, which is your listing obligations and disclosure requirements that has been provided by SEBI. Then we'll also look at clause 49. We'll talk about your Banking Regulation Act. We'll talk about your RBI Act. We'll also look at some portions of Companies Act which are relevant from, let's say, the banking sector perspective. So all of those things will be covered from a corporate governance standpoint. Then we'll basically looking at another important angle, which is your e-governance, right? In terms of addressing issues pertaining to corruption and also looking at inefficiencies in the government sector. So look at e-governance holistically as a tool, as a tech enabler, so as to ensure that the government is able to function in a much better manner, right? So we'll discuss a lot of the policies and initiatives that have been started by the government. We'll talk about your mission mode projects here. We'll basically look at your national e-governance plan. We'll also talk about your ease in terms of banking, right? So all of these things will be covered quite holistically as far as this segment is concerned. And what are the different models that are there in e-governance? That's something which will also be discovered and unearthed as far as this particular chapter is concerned. Now, moving further, we'll obviously look at one of the most important chapters is basically your fintech. What are the latest developments in technology from a finance standpoint? How is that benefiting the overall sector? What kind of impact is it having on the consumers? What kind of impact is it having on other stakeholders? So these are some things that we will be discussing in fintech. What are the technology enablers? What are the policy enablers? And what the future holds as far as fintech is concerned. So those are things that we'll be covering from a fintech perspective. And then looking at another very important module, which basically is the combination of finance and ESI, right? So a lot of topics, basically, as far as ESI and finance are concerned, there is definitely a significant amount of overlap as well. So there are certain topics which, if covered in ESI, would actually make a lot more sense than if they are covered in finance. So from that perspective, the angle of your union budget in terms of your concepts, approach, and your broad trends, this is something which will be covered as part of your economic and social issues. And we'll also look at covering inflation in terms of its definition, trends, estimates, WPI, CPI, and basically the balance between inflation and growth. All of these things in terms of monetary policy and fiscal policy measures, all of this will essentially be covered in the next module, which basically will be taken as part of your economic and social issues, right? So essentially, when we look at the overall footprint as far as finance is concerned, we'll essentially be looking at three modules, which is your financial systems. Then we'll look at your financial markets and then basically move into general topics. Now, the sequence of these topics will obviously depend on the amount of understanding of fundamental concepts in finance that is required. So from that perspective, what we'll also look at providing you is basics of finance, right? So from that perspective, there are certain elements which will get covered. So we'll obviously be look at covering basic accounting principles for you guys, right? And we'll also be looking at covering another very important aspect, which is your financial ratios as well, right? So while this might not be that important considering the fact that you don't have any numericals in the past 3 years, but that doesn't make it absolutely certain that there won't be any numericals coming in the subsequent years either. So which is where it's important for you to understand these things as well. Now, accounting principles and financial ratios understanding will also help you understand, let's say, risk management, corporate governance a lot better, right? Because you also look at alternate sources of finance. So all these are topics which require some bit of fundamental understanding of finance as well. So once you cover the basics from this standpoint, it will help you understand some of these topics in a much better manner, right? So that's in a nutshell in terms of the breakage of syllabus and the modules themselves. Now, what we look at additionally is how are we looking to cover these modules and what exactly is in store for you if you decide to go ahead with the paid program. So when I talk about the overall methodology or the teaching style or the pedagogy, what exactly are we going to be taking care of, right? So the first thing that we'll be looking at is obviously starting with a video introduction, and this session obviously will be very important because it will clearly give you insights in terms of how you're going to approach the entire paper, how are you going to prepare for it, what are the important tips and techniques that are going to be used throughout this program, and what exactly do you need to do on a day-to-day basis. So this is something which will be covered in the introductory session, and then subsequently we'll obviously have video lectures which will cover all the topics that are there across the modules, that is Finance A, Finance B and Finance C. So talking about financial systems, financial markets and your general topics as well. Now the sequencing of these topics would obviously depend on what is the level of understanding you possess at a given point in time. So obviously it's not as if that it will be starting with A, then we move to B and then we move to C. Wherever I feel that, let's say, a particular topic in C needs more attention, or let's say needs to happen much before, let's say, some other topic, then I'll probably have that particular topic coming in ahead of some other topic, right? So the sequencing would entirely depend on how we want to ensure that the maximum learning happens for you, right? And that's the way in which all the topics will be sequenced. But the important point is every single topic that is there in the syllabus will definitely be covered. And of course, it goes without saying that when you look at your video lectures, you'll also get lecture notes pertaining to those videos as well, which will basically cover all the topics that have been discussed in those video lectures, and it will give you let's say quick notes in the form of revision for you guys, and you can basically look through those notes to kind of revise what has been taught in the video lectures and, let's say, internalize the concepts as well, right? So this will be available for every video lecture that's there. So you'll also have your lecture notes. Another important angle to look at is you have to reinforce the learning that is there, right? So from that perspective, we will ensure that you have chapter-wise quizzes in each of the modules and each of the individual chapters that are there. So these quizzes will ensure that whatever you have actually learned in the video lectures and whatever you have revised in the lecture notes, that is something which will get reinforced in terms of learning, and it will give you a good opportunity to revise your concepts, right? So that's why you'll have your chapter-wise quizzes also being there. Then, of course, you look at basically something called as your module test. So at the end of every module, you'll basically have a module test, and this module test will obviously have a separate module test for your MCQs and a separate module test for your DQs or your descriptive questions as well. So both of these will be covered holistically from that standpoint also. So module test again will ensure that, let's say, after the chapter-wise quizzes have been conducted, once that entire module is over, you'll also have another opportunity to revise and look at your fundamental concepts from that standpoint also. Next thing that you'll get is basically something called as one concept a day, right? So this basically will be run for a particular duration of time, and it will basically carry one concept or one particular theory or one particular topic being covered in a particular day, right? And it will obviously have a sort of a PDF document that will be provided to you along with a quiz at the end of that particular concept. So only one concept will be picked for one particular day, and you'll have a quiz at the end of that particular concept, and it will basically be in the form of a PDF. And this OCAD is purely PDF driven, and it's a very, very quick way for you to understand concepts and revise concepts as well. So the other thing that will happen is once the OCAD series is done, you'll also have all the OCAD quizzes basically consolidated into a PDF, so that this will be available as a ready reference for you at a later date. So that is something that will be happening additionally. Next thing that will be there is something which we started this year and was quite successful, and we call it the value adds and revision series. So once the entire syllabus is completed, we'll basically look at bringing in additional concepts, let's say in terms of latest current affairs that is there, or let's say latest circulars that are there that have come out pertaining to that particular topic, right? And these VAR sessions will be split into those three modules, right? So we talk about finance A, B and C. So your VAR sessions will again be pertaining to financial systems, pertaining to financial markets and pertaining to general topics. And it will obviously look at providing two very critical things. One, again, an opportunity for you to revise concepts. And second, it also provides you the opportunity to look at value adds from that particular module's perspective, right? So that is the VAR sessions. The next thing that we'll be looking at is, of course, the doubt solving sessions that will be basically happening on the basis of questions raised. Now, this obviously could happen based on the earlier sessions that have been conducted, or it could also be based on, let's say, something that has been discussed in the Facebook group itself. Now, the point is the Facebook group acts as a way for you to interact with the faculty and also other members who have basically enrolled for the program. So it basically provides you a closed community of friends who can basically help you out in your preparation. You can basically raise your queries and doubts and concerns and get them answered. So we also look at another very important aspect, which is your peer-to-peer helping, right? So in case the doubts are not cleared by the peers, then basically the faculty step in and answer the queries and doubts as well. But what we have seen is over the years, peers also bring in, and your friends also are able to help and solve a lot of your questions and queries, right? So from that perspective, a close community group really helps. In case the peers or let's say your friends are not able to answer your queries or address your queries satisfactorily, then of course the faculty will step in and answer those queries as well, right? Now, next thing we'll also be looking at doing is, let's say we basically consolidate a lot of those queries together and look at doing video sessions for that as well if required, right? So most of these queries are obviously answered on the group itself, and we'll also look at videos to basically look at solving your doubts. Next thing, which basically derives itself from 8, is what I call as the FBO, or for the benefit of the others, right? A lot of things which I observed last year was that there were many doubts that students had raised, and obviously finance is something which is fairly new to a lot of people, right? So you will definitely have doubts. So the important angle is, let's say that I'm a student A, right? And I basically possess, let's say, a knowledge of 50 in finance, right? And there is another student B who basically possesses a knowledge of, let's say, only about 30. Now, when A asks a doubt, that doubt will obviously be at a level which is probably higher than 50. Now, what about B? B does not have a knowledge up to 50. So, right, so if A is asking something which B does not understand, how do I bring B up to speed? Because it's important that B also understands the doubt that had been raised by A, right? So from that perspective, what we do is what we call as the for the benefit of others, or FBO. So in this case, what happens is that, let's say if A asked a doubt, obviously the doubt that A had obviously will get clarified. But at the same time, let's say there is a particular topic that A asked a doubt in, and let's say there are other students like B who do not understand that topic at all. So then this session, which is your FBO, essentially looks at catering those topics wherein the doubt has come, but the topic itself is quite new and quite different, and it's important that the other students in the batch also understand that topic. So from that perspective, we've started something called as FBO, or for the benefit of others. Now, while this was happening on a unofficial basis in the previous year, this time it will be properly formalized and available to you guys as well, right? So this is an additional way in which we will address a lot of knowledge gaps from the student's perspective. Next thing that we look at is basically the coverage of all your relevant RBI circulars, various reports that are there, the indices that are basically getting released, and a lot of your acts like the RBI Act, your NI Act, your Banking Regulation Act, then you talk about your Payments and Settlement Systems Act, so on and so forth. So all of these will essentially be covered, and this obviously becomes a part of the dynamic portion of the syllabus, and it also gives you a strong way to bring in the interlinkages between what is studied in the static topics vis-a-vis what is the latest data that is available here, right? So this again becomes a very, very important angle to the preparation. Next thing that we look at addressing is also looking at building basic banking awareness, right, in the form of sessions, so that your fundamentals on a lot of basic topics also get cleared. So for example, you talk about what are the functions of a bank, right? So what are the different types of banks that are there, what are the different fund-based products, non-fund-based products that a bank can basically provide, what is a business correspondent, what are the different types of bank accounts, what if I'm a foreigner, what kind of accounts can I hold, if I'm an NRI, what kind of accounts can I hold. So all of these kind of things will also get covered in the form of your banking awareness itself. So a lot of sessions will be conducted from that perspective also. Then we'll be looking at something which we had launched last year, which we basically called it as dawn. Dawn obviously is the morning or the beginning of something. So when I say dawn, what do I mean here? We're talking about descriptive answer writing naturally. So what we'll be doing here is that we'll be covering a lot of fundamental concepts in these sessions, right? So at the end of these sessions, you obviously have your chapter-wise MCQ quizzes also. By the same time, we'll also look at a lot of questions that can be possible from that particular chapter in the form of your descriptive answer writing naturally. So this is something which will be covered. Now, some of these sessions will of course be feedback oriented, wherein basically it will be an open session on the closed group, and you'll get a feedback in terms of what you've written and what exactly are you expected to write, and let's say what are the improvements that can be made. And of course, you'll have other means also that will be there. For example, there'll be certain questions for which you'll be provided with model answers, right? And for certain questions, you'll always look at your self-evaluation as well. And again, another important aspect here will be your peer-to-peer evaluation also. So these are the 4 modes in which you'll basically look at your dawn being provided to you as far as finance is concerned. So again, descriptive answer writing needs to come to you naturally, right? So we'll basically take all the methods that are required, all the steps that are required to ensure that you build this skill holistically, because descriptive writing is obviously a very, very important aspect of your RBI preparation, right? So this is something which we'll be covering quite holistically. So there will definitely be open feedback sessions as well, but at the same time, you'll also get model answers to some of the questions. You'll also get ways, or let's say means, in which you can look at your self-evaluation and peer-to-peer evaluations also. So this is something which will be covered as part of your dawn. So you'll also basically at the end of every chapter get a list of questions that are possible from, let's say, a descriptive writing perspective, and that is also going to give you a list of questions from that standpoint. So that also will be something that will add to the number of questions available to you. But one disclaimer here, obviously, that all of this activities pertaining to dawn will heavily depend on how much you are able to give or contribute, right? So because the feedback is possible only when you write, right? Your self-evaluation or your peer-to-peer evaluation is possible only when you write. So that is something which is an integral part. So there's a disclaimer here. You have to write, only then the evaluation can happen. So while we'll try and provide model answers to questions, but obviously model answers will not be available for every single question, right? So a lot of that will actually happen based on your writing and essentially the feedback that you get from the faculty or the feedback that you get from your peers as well, right? So that is the disclaimer I wanted to highlight here. Next thing is that you'll basically have couple of compendiums at your disposal, or called as compendia. So one compendium will be pertaining to your multiple choice questions, and you'll also have one compendium pertaining to your descriptive questions. So MCQs, again, the questions will be segregated in the form of, let's say, the chapter wise quizzes that are there. Then obviously it will also contain the quizzes that have been there in OCAD, and also the VAR sessions that have been conducted. And let's say there will be additional questions that will be brought in from, let's say, DOLF solving and your FBOs as well. And also look at questions from the coverage that we've done from a reports, indices and circular standpoint. So you'll get a compendium at the end of it all, which will basically combine a lot of questions, and it will also include the questions that were there in the module tests as well. But additionally, there will be some additional questions also that will be there as part of the MCQs as well, right? As far as descriptive questions is concerned, you'll also have model answers for some of those questions and maybe pointers for some of the other questions. It's important for you to understand that while model answers is a way for you to write, that's not the only way to write. So, right, there are multiple ways in which you can write an answer and get good marks for it, right? So obviously you'll not have model answers for every question, but definitely you will get pointers in terms of what needs to be written in that question. So that is something which will be there, right? So basically compendiums pertaining to your MCQs and your compendium pertaining to your descriptive questions as well. Another important aspect that we'll basically be looking to cover is in terms of your interlinkages. So you'll have your news updates that will keep happening, and there'll be discussions that will happen on the group itself. So this again would give you a lot of data that is required in terms of forming that interlinkage or that connection between the dynamic aspect of the question versus the static aspect, right? So that interlinkage is again very important in terms of conveying to the RBI that you understand that particular topic holistically, right? So interlinkages is again something that will be quite extensively highlighted, and this again will be covered in the form of news updates and discussions on the group, right? So of course, this is something which will be there as part of the overall offering as far as finance is concerned. And again, when I talk about compendia, it will also carry some additional questions that will be there. Now, apart from all of this, you'll also have 3 full-length tests that will be available in finance, and these full-length tests will obviously be provided along with the answers and, let's say, the discussion in the form of a video as well, right? So that is something which will be there. Now, obviously, these 3 full-length tests are in addition to the test series that we were talking about, right? So when you talk about the phase 2 test series, those of you who clear phase 1 will automatically be eligible for getting that phase 2 test series as well. But essentially these full length tests will be available to everyone who has basically taken the phase 2 program, right? So that is something which will be there in addition to these 14 points. So essentially the 15th point is essentially your 3 full-length tests as well, right? So this is the way in which we are looking to cover the entire portion of finance. and ensure that there is a very, very strong learning, but at the same time we are also constantly revising and also looking at testing ourselves, so that whatever we are undergoing in the program, that learning gets enforced into our system. So that is what we are going to be looking at as far as this particular segment in the RBI Phase 2 preparation is concerned. So this is how we look at addressing finance overall, right? So I'm sure that this is going to be extremely interesting and exciting for a lot of you guys, and obviously you will get to learn a lot about finance. You'll get to learn a lot of new concepts and fundamentals, but at the same time you'll also be improving yourselves in terms of your personality, because a strong understanding in finance obviously gives you a good confidence level as well. And a lot of this preparation is going to be extremely helpful in the ultimate stage as far as this preparation is concerned, which is the interview stage as well. So whatever you're doing in terms of finance learning in this particular program will ensure that you're not only prepared for phase 2, but also getting prepared holistically for the interview stage, which again has a very, very high weightage overall, right? So that is something which we will be looking at covering from a finance perspective. So one thing that is important to understand is that the paper of the RBI is definitely quite dynamic in nature, in the sense that there is a lot of reading, a lot of knowledge that is required. One important point that I'd like to highlight here is that as far as the syllabus change is concerned, right? So for 2 years there was no syllabus change, and then suddenly this year there was a syllabus change. In the context of finance, the syllabus change was not that massive. So roughly 80% of the syllabus remained the same. Minor additions were there on certain important topics, and certain rejigs were happening, right? So obviously 80 to 85% of the syllabus remained the same, right? An additional 10 to 15% of the syllabus was something that had to be prepared additionally. So from that perspective, even if you think of it from the next year's standpoint, having changed the syllabus this year, the syllabus again changing next year is slightly unlikely. The probability of that happening is slightly lesser. Having said that, even if that syllabus change happens, whatever you're going to be studying right now is something which obviously will be forming a significant part of the change syllabus also, if at all that change happens, right? So this will continue to form a significant portion of your change syllabus also. So there is no point in waiting for the notification to come and then start preparing, because there will be hardly any time left at that stage. So you got to start with the assumption that the syllabus will remain the same, and complete this particular syllabus to the best level possible with a very strong understanding, with your basics and your fundamentals clear. Once you do that, what will happen is, in case there is a syllabus change at all at a later stage, then you can concentrate on only those topics which have been added newly, right? Because your basics and your fundamentals from the earlier portion will be very clear by that time, right? So which is where, firstly, the chances of a syllabus change is highly unlikely, because it has just changed this year. Even if that syllabus change happens, if you're very well prepared in the other portions that are there in the syllabus, then this new syllabus change will not have significant worry for you, because you'll have enough time to prepare for that new syllabus also. Secondly, if there is at all a change in the syllabus, obviously we will ensure that we put our best foot forward to cover that new syllabus for you guys, right? Obviously, this is something which we have done for our students this year as well, and we will continue to do that for our students in the coming years also, right? So don't worry from a syllabus change perspective. It is something which will be tackled in the course holistically. So I hope this session would have given you a complete overview of what the finance program as far as Meritshine is concerned is all about, and what exactly are going to be the things that we are going to deal with, and the entire pedagogy and the methodology that we're going to adopt as far as this particular program is concerned. So I hope all those queries have been addressed, and let's take a pledge together that we're going to work together to crack this exam, right? So as I keep saying, keep visualizing, keep dreaming about RBI Grade B, and eventually it'll turn out to be a grand success. So on that note, this is Ravi signing off, and I look forward to seeing you in the next session. Until then, have a great day and a wonderful, wonderful week ahead. See you guys.